The shadow beneath the neon. In a city that never sleeps, beneath the glittering neon lights, one man wanders through the ruins of his own conscience. This is not a story about good or evil. It's about the trembling space between them. A story of guilt, faith, and redemption in a world that has forgotten both God and mercy. Part 1. The Man Who Didn't Sleep. Michael Anderson hadn't slept properly in 6 months. His eyes were the color of stale whiskey, and his face, once firm and confident, had the weary slackness of a man who'd looked too long into the darkness and started to see familiar shapes within it. He lived in a small apartment above a pawn shop in downtown Chicago. Every night he sat by the window, watching the city pulse below. Sirens, laughter, and the faint hum of electricity that never ceased. Somewhere, deep in that hum, he thought he could hear a voice. Not a real one, not quite, but a whisper that reminded him of who he used to be. Michael was 48. Once he'd been a lawyer, a good one. He had a family, a wife, 2 daughters, a mortgage, and the kind of reputation that made people shake his hand a little longer. He used to believe in justice, or at least in the illusion of it. But that was before the incident, before the night that divided his life into a before and after. He never told anyone exactly what happened that night. There were rumors, a client who disappeared, a falsified report, a bribe that went too far. But Michael never confirmed or denied them. He simply left the firm, sold his house, and vanished from polite society. Every evening he walked to the diner on State Street, the one that stayed open past midnight. The waitress, a woman named Ruth, knew his order by heart. Black coffee, no sugar, 2 scrambled eggs. He rarely spoke more than a few words, but Ruth liked him anyway. There was something tragic in his silence, something that made her think of her own brother who'd died in Iraq. "Rough night again?" she'd ask sometimes, pouring his coffee. "They're all rough," Michael would reply, staring into the steaming cup like it held the secret to forgiveness. But tonight was different. The diner's TV, usually muted, was playing the news. A familiar face appeared on the screen. Jonathan Pierce, the senior partner of Michael's old firm. The man was giving a press statement outside a courthouse, flanked by reporters. Words crawled across the screen. "Corporate lawyer indicted in embezzlement scandal." Michael froze. The coffee trembled in his hand. For a long moment, he couldn't move. His reflection in the diner window seemed to look back at him with quiet disgust. He remembered Pierce's words from years ago. "The law isn't about truth, Mike. It's about what you can make people believe." And now, the empire Pierce had built, their empire, was collapsing. Michael left the diner without finishing his meal. The night air felt heavy, electric. He walked for hours through the empty streets, past the glowing signs and boarded-up stores. He thought about calling his daughter, the younger one, Emily. She was 21 now, a college student somewhere in Oregon. But what would he say? "Hi, sweetheart, it's Dad, the man who taught you never to lie, then built his life on lies." He passed a homeless man huddled beneath a streetlight. The man was holding a cardboard sign that read, "God sees you." Michael stopped, staring at the sign as if it were addressed to him personally. "Yeah?" he muttered bitterly. "Well, I hope he's looking the other way tonight." But as he turned to leave, the man suddenly lifted his head. His eyes, pale, almost colorless, met Michael's. And for a fleeting second, Michael felt something like recognition, though he couldn't say why. "Some debts," the man said softly, "can't be paid in money." Michael's breath caught. "How do you—" But the man lowered his gaze again, silent. Michael walked away faster this time, his heartbeat loud in his ears. When he finally reached his apartment, he sat down in the dark, hands trembling. On the table lay an unopened envelope, something that had arrived a week ago from his old firm. He hadn't dared to touch it. Now, for reasons he didn't understand, he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature, Just 3 words, typed in bold, "We know everything." Michael stared at it, his stomach turning to ice. For the first time in months, he prayed. But as the first light of dawn bled through the blinds, Michael Anderson realized that prayers, like debts, don't always reach their destination. Part 2. A Debt Without Interest. Michael woke to the weight of the words. "We know everything." They lay on his chest like a brick while the city scraped daylight across the window. He tried to ignore them, made coffee, stared at the kettle, scrolled absent-mindedly through an old phone filled with numbers he no longer dared to dial. None of it helped. The letter sat there, patient as an executioner. He left the apartment purely to outrun his own pulse. The street smelled of rain and warm plastic. He drifted past the pawnshop window where a trumpet crouched like a trapped bird, down toward the river where joggers, those relentless, earnest creatures, dotted the path with neon shoes and podcasts about productivity. He envied their faith in forward motion. He had once believed in motion, too. Now he knew some people were born to pace a single square of floor until their legs gave out. He stopped at a church he hadn't noticed before. Red brick, modest, a cross that looked more like a question than an answer. The door was open. Inside, a janitor with a face like sandpaper was stacking metal chairs in a circle in the fellowship hall. "AA at noon," the man grunted. "Coffee's bad. Stories are worse." Michael almost laughed. "That's a hell of an invitation. You coming or not?" "I don't drink." The janitor shrugged. "Nobody comes because of the alcohol." He looked at Michael with a curious tenderness. "You've got the look, friend. The kind a man gets when he owes someone and isn't sure who." Michael thought of the envelope. What if the someone is the past? The janitor slid a chair into the circle. "The past shows up on time more than any of us." Michael didn't stay, but something about the chairs, their patient, anticipatory arrangement, followed him out. He wandered to the diner where Ruth greeted him with a nod that felt like a benediction. "You see the news last night?" she asked. He pretended he hadn't. The TV in the corner was muted again, but the captions danced like gnats. "Pierce to plead not guilty." The image shifted to a woman, short hair, square jaw, a prosecutor's cool fire, speaking into microphones. Her name scrolled under her face. ADA Nora Whitaker. The city turned such people into emblems. Clean lines, polished vowels, righteous fury in a manageable dose. Ruth refilled his cup. "You look like a man standing near a cliff and pretending to admire the view." "Do I? Everybody in here does, in their own way." She cocked her head. "Yours is just quieter." "Ruth," he said suddenly, "do you think people can start over?" She didn't answer right away. "I think some of us don't start at all until we're already over." When he left a tip, she slid her hand across the table and squeezed his fingers for the smallest fraction of a second. The human hand is a strange confessional. It says, "I know, but I'll be gentle." Outside, the wind had picked up. The homeless man from last night, sign folded like a broken wing, was at the corner again. The same pale eyes. If anything about the city was sacred, it was the way certain faces reappeared at the moments you least wished to see yourself. Michael approached him with a caution that felt like reverence. "Do you remember me?" The man's gaze sharpened, then softened. "I remember everybody who hears me." "What's your name?" "Names are receipts. Call me Abel." He smiled wryly. "Everyone remembers that one." Michael swallowed. "Abel, can I ask, what did you mean by debts that can't be paid in money?" Abel tilted his head as if listening to a station Michael couldn't hear. "You used to carry a briefcase," he said. "Now you carry nights." He tapped the sign. "God sees you." "It's not a threat. Not from me. Maybe from him." He shrugged. "Depends which God you owe." And before Michael could press further, a police siren floated by. A breeze scattered receipts along the gutter, and Abel drifted toward a Catholic mission van like a leaf drawn to shade. It occurred to Michael that the city might be one giant confessional, always waiting, always half empty. He returned to his apartment and at last dialed a number. It rang 5 times before a woman answered with a guarded, "Hello?" "Karen," he said. His ex-wife breathed audibly, a habit of hers when bracing for the past. "Michael, is something wrong?" He stared at the envelope. "I wanted to ask about Emily." "She's fine," Karen said. "She's studying. She has a boyfriend who wears boots in summer. You would hate him for the boots and like him for everything else." He nearly smiled. "And Anna?" "Married, as you know." The coolness in Karen's voice thinned. "Her husband's good to her. They bought a house in Milwaukee. You could visit, you know. The door isn't locked, Michael. You're the one who stands on the porch." "I know." He swallowed the ache. "Did you see the news?" "Everyone saw it. Does it involve you?" He considered lying, and in that moment felt the precise weight of the habit that had ruined him. "Yes," he said finally. The word snapped like a bone. "Are you safe?" "I don't know." She was silent long enough for him to imagine forgiveness, which is to say, long enough to hurt. "I don't want the girls dragged into this," she said carefully. "If there's a storm coming, don't bring it here." "I wouldn't," he said, and meant it, and understood that meaning wouldn't matter. After they hung up, Michael opened his old laptop and typed the name that all his thoughts circled, Elias Crow. He hit enter and saw a graveyard of links, the case that had made Pierce a legend, the case that had promoted Michael from talent to partner. Crow had been the whistleblower in a pharmaceutical fraud suit 10 years ago, a quiet accountant, devout, with a habit of writing letters to the editor about justice and the common good. Then he had fallen apart. Rumors of a breakdown, an accidental overdose. The case settled. The company paid a fine that did not equal a month's revenue. Pierce became a star. Michael drank expensive scotch and told himself he had done what the system required. He remembered Crow's last day on the stand, how his hands trembled. He remembered a document the defense produced, perfectly damning, perfectly timed. A ledger Crow had supposedly doctored to incriminate the company. Michael remembered the Excel file, the metadata, with its unfamiliar fingerprints. He remembered not asking too hard where it came from. He closed the laptop and pressed his forehead to the cool table. There it was, like a brass nail in the palm. The debt without interest. At dusk, he went back to the church. The metal chairs were full. People spoke in turns, voices flat with practiced humility. A woman with nicotine fingers talked about stealing from her own mother. A man with a banker's haircut described waking up in a Holiday Inn bathtub with his suit folded beside him like a corpse. When no one else volunteered, the janitor glanced at Michael. He stood without meaning to. "I'm not an alcoholic," he said, which made a few people chuckle gently. "But I might be addicted to the way my own lies sound when I use them to build a life." He paused. "I used to think the law was an argument. I think now it's a diet. You eat what you can live with." He didn't say Crow's name. He didn't explain metadata or settlement piles or how a good man dies by inches. He said, "I ruined someone because the system allowed me to. And I let it be enough that I didn't personally put the knife in, but the knife has to live somewhere." Afterward, the janitor caught his sleeve. "I'm Ben," he said. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be scraping gum off floors until the resurrection." "Ben," Michael said, surprised to feel tears that did not quite fall. "Does confession count if you don't name the crime?" Ben considered. "Maybe confession starts when the mouth learns the shape of silence. The naming comes later, when you trust the room." Outside, snow had begun to fall, thin, uncertain flakes. The city's neon looked almost tender through it. Michael walked home with his collar up, and for the first time in months he slept, not all night, but enough to dream. In the dream, Abel and Crow were playing chess on a table of stacked legal pads. Every piece was a small numbered pill. When he woke, There was a message on his phone from an unknown number. Meet me tomorrow. 3 p.m., Old Post Office steps, come alone. Attached was a photograph taken through a window, a grainy snapshot of him at the diner, Ruth pouring coffee. The subject line read, "Everything means everything." He stared at the picture, then at the clock. The world had rolled a little forward, as worlds do when they're about to become something else. Part 3. The Bargain Under the Bridge. He arrived early to the old post office, that massive relic straddling the river like a patient animal. A freeway roared through its belly, secret and ceaseless. He stood on the steps, trying to look like a man with errands. Abel appeared from behind a pillar, as if conjured. Michael startled. "You?" Michael said. "Are you the one—" Abel shook his head, amused. "I don't text. I receive." He gestured with his chin toward a man approaching from the street. Shaved head, gray parka, the unpanicked walk of someone trained to live behind his own eyes. He stopped at the bottom step and looked up with the businesslike sorrow of a funeral director. "Mr. Anderson," he said, "I had a feeling you'd still answer a summons written in the old language." "What language is that?" "Threat," the man said politely. "I'm Adam Novak." Michael knew the name, the way you know the echo of a gunshot, by absence. Novak had been Pierce's fixer, the man who ate inconvenient facts and digested them into plausible reality. "I don't work for Pierce anymore," Novak said, reading his thought. "He's not paying anyone these days, and I never worked for him so much as for the story he told about how the world works. I'm out of that job now." He nodded at Abel. "Your friend here warned me you might bolt. He's got a nose for people who mistake fear for wisdom." "Why am I here?" Michael asked. "What do you have?" Novak handed him a thumb drive as plain as a bullet. "Breadcrumbs," he said. "Enough to bake something edible if you have a kitchen." He watched Michael turn the drive over as if it might sprout fangs. "Elias Crow didn't doctor those ledgers. We did. I did. Pierce told me what to feed the court. You fed it with him. It killed the man, slowly, which is how we do it here. We applaud ourselves for the absence of blood." Abel shifted, his sign tucked under his arm like a violin. The wind carried stale winter through the freeway's steel ribs. "And why?" Michael asked carefully. "Are you telling me this now?" Novak tilted his head. "Because I once loved a daughter who no longer answers my calls. Because my heart is tired of arranging other men's guilt into bouquets. Because the government has Whitaker building a case, but she doesn't know the words to the deepest parts of the song." He smiled without pleasure. "And because you will crawl farther on your knees than any of us will run on our feet." "What do you want from me?" "Deliver it. Not to the tabloids. To someone who can write the story with clean hands." Novak's eyes flicked up the steps where a woman stood in a wool coat, hands in pockets, watching them. Her, maybe. Whitaker descended with the patient stride of someone who knows nobody can outrun her. Up close, she looked younger than the TV suggested, but also older in the way of people who read too much pain in files. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "I was hoping our next meeting would be under different circumstances." "You know each other," Novak said. "How sweetly efficient. Counselor, I brought you one of your missing words." Whitaker's eyes lingered on the drive. "You're Novak." "I am whatever the room needs," he said lightly. "Today I'm a man tired of keeping other men sacred." He nodded. "You two should talk. I'll be a roomer somewhere nearby if needed." He touched Abel's arm on his way out. "Confess something for me," he said to him, and disappeared into the eddies of traffic. Whitaker's gaze stayed on Michael. "Why now?" He heard the question's second law. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I owe a dead man," he said. "Because I thought the law was a machine you oil with plausible words until it gives you the outcome you want. Because my daughter's voice on the phone sounds like a station I can't quite tune." Whitaker nodded, a precise movement, not unkind. "We're building a rack of charges. Shell companies, bribes, accounting fraud. But the Crow matter, if confirmed, turns Pierce into something else entirely. It turns him into a man who would weaponize a quiet conscience and make the public thank him for it. She slipped the drive into her coat. "Come by tomorrow. I want a sworn statement." He imagined the headlines. He imagined Pierce's eyes, cold as a courtroom bench. "I'll come," he said. "By the way," Whitaker added as he turned to go, "do you still attend St. Mark's on Lake Street?" He blinked. "Attend?" "You spoke at AA yesterday. Ben told me." At his surprise, she added, "He's my brother." The world rearranged itself. Ben's worn hands, Whitaker's clean files. Two pillars of the same strange temple. Something like warmth touched the air between them. "Your brother saved me from my mouth," Michael said. "He's good at that," Whitaker said, and for the first time he saw the flicker of private grief in her, the kind that cannot be televised. As Michael crossed the bridge, Abel fell into step beside him. "Be careful," he murmured. "When you start moving toward light, the shadows notice. They were living off your rent." "Are you a preacher?" Michael asked. "God forbid," Abel said, smiling. "I just remember better than most what I've done. Memory is a poverty that owns a car. That night, Michael tried the thumb drive. In the glow of the laptop, he saw a map of signatures, time-stamped edits, emails between Novak and a freelance consultant, a small clutch of internal memos buried in innocuous subjects like lunch order and parking validation. At the center of the web was a name he didn't recognize, Dr. Leland Rath, an expert witness who had testified about digital forensics in the Crow case. There were payments, perfectly legal in appearance, routed through a nonprofit whose mission statement could have been copy-pasted from any philanthropic brochure. A ledger in which a series of donations lined up with a series of opinions. The smell of it, even through the screen, was surgical, antiseptic, clean, inhuman. He didn't sleep. At dawn, he walked again, the river wearing its thin armor of ice. The city's patience felt almost personal. He had the drive. He had his intention, which is the coin a man pays when he can't find cash. At the courthouse, Whitaker met him with a small smile that managed not to make promises. She listened to him talk for an hour, her pen moving like a metronome. "You will be crucified in the press," she said when he finished. "You understand that." "Crucifixion implies a cross," he said. "I'm not that important. I'll be mugged in the comments." "Comments cut in a million smaller ways," she said. "But they cut." "I'm tired of my blood staying still," he said. She slid a document across the table. "Then sign." He did, and in that moment he felt something shift in the air, as if the city had exhaled, as if heaven, if it existed, had allowed one more square inch of sunlight to sit on the table without explanation. When he left the building, a black car pulled up to the curb with the smooth aggression of money. A window slid down. Pierce looked out. Jonathan Pierce had always been handsome in the way of sharks, all angles, symmetrical, impossible to anthropomorphize. "Michael," he said as if they were between golf holes, "get in." Michael stood at the curb. He realized he was the only person in view not pretending the scene was ordinary. He got in. The car smelled of new leather and old Victory. Pierce studied him as one studies the reliability of a chair. "This is disappointing," he said conversationally. "I had hoped your self-pity would keep you occupied." "Some people quit drinking," Michael said. "I quit looking away." Pierce smiled faintly. "You were always moral adjacent. It's why I liked you." "Crow," Michael said. "You killed him with a lie." "Crow killed himself with belief," Pierce said with something like pity. "There's nothing more dangerous than a man who thinks he's right. He becomes indigestible. The system choked on him. I tried to help it swallow." Michael stared. "You can't hear yourself." "Oh, I can," Pierce said, amused. "I just don't consider the soundtrack morally binding." He leaned back. "You've given Whitaker something. Novak, probably. He's always wanted to audition for Conscience. Fine. We'll handle it." "Handle?" Michael repeated. You underestimate how much the world wants to maintain itself. It will eat your confession and burp politely. He tapped the car door. Go home. Pray if you like. The God of men like you isn't listening. He only collects. Michael's hand twitched on the handle. You won't win this time. Pierce's eyes softened in that terrible, intimate way successful men have when regarding those they've outlived. Winning is not the point, he murmured. Endurance is. The truth is only as strong as the man willing to die for it. Are you? Michael opened the door. I hope, he said, I won't have to do it alone. He stepped onto the sidewalk, the cold honest as a diagnosis. Behind him, the car slid away like a thought a man refuses to finish. Part 4. The Rooms Where Pain is Counted. The news arrived with the appetite of a bear. Websites carried headlines like Weather, Former Partner Turns Witness. Strangers became experts in his fall. His inbox filled with reporters and with parishioners of the Church of Retrospective Ethics. How could you? Why didn't you? How dare you now? The past is a neighborhood that claims it never met you until it wants your mail. Karen called at midnight. The girls are scared, she said, voice taut. They don't want to be in the photos. They won't be, he promised. I won't let them be. Michael, she faltered, then steadied. I don't know if you understand how elastic the Internet's cruelty is. It will stretch from you to them without asking. I know. Do you? The softness sharpened. Because knowing it now doesn't return the years. It doesn't put back the certainties you spent. He took the blow. You're right. Something in his acceptance took the fight out of her. Emily texted me, she said more gently. She asked if you were trying to be a hero. I told her heroes are just people who lose neatly. He swallowed. Thank you for telling me anyway. After they hung up, he went back to St. Mark's. Ben was coiling a vacuum cord like a rope he expected to climb someday. They're calling me a traitor, Michael said, almost bemused. Ben shrugged. If you leave one room, the people who stay will always say you betrayed the furniture. I'm scared. Good. Ben patted a chair. Sit. Fear is just the alarm version of conscience. They had coffee in styrofoam cups. The hall smelled of old soup, lemon cleaner, and the spiced musk of complicated lives. Abel drifted in, carrying a new sign. Mercy is not efficient. He set it against the wall and joined them, uninvited in the way only welcome people are. You ever been to a bankruptcy hearing? Abel asked conversationally. I've argued a few, Michael admitted. I like them, Abel said. Everybody admits they can't pay. That's honesty government sanctioned. Is there an equivalent for the soul? Michael asked. Abel smiled. Every morning you wake up. Whitaker called from the office. We've connected Novak's materials to Wrath, she said. I have a grand jury next week. It will be ugly. Are you ready? No, he said, but I'm ready enough. And Michael, she hesitated. Leland Wrath is in Arizona. He runs a consultancy that launders its conscience as community outreach. We'll need him. A pause. There is one thing more. Do you recall a paralegal named Dana Cho? Of course. Dana had been meticulous, kind, the sort of person whose emails made you feel more competent than you were. She's missing, Whitaker said. Left work 3 nights ago. Her brother reported it this morning. A cold spool unrolled inside him. Because of us? Because of somebody, Whitaker said. The timing isn't friendly. The city changed flavor overnight. Suddenly, every alley looked curated. Every stranger had a sponsor. Michael walked with his head up, the way a man carries a fragile package. He met Ruth at the diner. Her mouth tightened when she saw him. You're the news now, she said. I don't like when my friends are the news. Friends, he repeated, startled. She poured coffee. Don't make me take it back. A man at the counter, the kind who collects grievance like stamps, swiveled on his stool. You the lawyer who turned rat? He asked idly. Michael stared at the man's hands, the way they cradled the fork like a small tool of jurisdiction. I'm the man who got tired of sleeping next to himself, he said. The man grinned. Must be nice to choose the day you get morals. Ruth placed 2 eggs in front of the man with unnecessary force. Must be nice to choose the day you mind your own plate, she said sweetly. He shut up. Later, walking back through a ribbon of wind, Michael sensed rather than saw the car. The same black sedan, or its brother. He turned down a side street. The car matched. He cut through an alley, climbed a chain-link fence, tore his coat, landed gracelessly, kept moving. He lost the sedan under an elevated track, where the steel thudded like a futuristic heart. He went to Whitaker's office with his fear in his pocket like a note. She listened, her jaw clamped, but she didn't look away. This is the part, she said, where everyone tests how much you mean it. How much I mean what? Truth, she said simply. They will find you at midnight. They will offer you silence in exchange for staying quiet. They will threaten to rehearse your sins for the crowd. They will say your daughter's names. They will count your life on an abacus made of your mistakes. She leaned back. And you will decide whether to love your own self-protection more than the dead man who can't speak. He thought of Crow's trembling hands. He thought of Dana, her deliberate voice, typing with the music of competence. He thought of Abel's sign. Mercy is not efficient. Where do I put my fear? He asked. Here, Whitaker said, tapping the table. We have room for it. That night he dreamed again of chess. This time the pills had faces, and each face had a small printed headline. He woke with his heart pounding a message in Morse. He dressed and walked to the river in pre-dawn blue. Abel was there, humming a hymn that never decided which key to be in. Wrath, Michael said. Language of the desert, Abel replied. You'll go to him. Yes. Bring someone who remembers your name that isn't a judge, Abel said. Or a savior. Bring a person who cleans floors. Michael blinked. Ben? Abel shrugged. Salt keeps meat from rotting. Bring salt. So he did a thing he would never have predicted. He asked Ben to fly with him to Phoenix. Ben had never flown. He wore his best shirt, plaid, hopeful, and gripped the armrests with such intensity that even the plane seemed to consider itself mortal. In the sky, they looked down at a country laid out like a moral lesson. Grids, deserts, scars of river, little wounds of light. At the rental car counter, Ben stared at the options. They give you a choice of sins, he said. Large, medium, or small. You have a way with comfort, Michael muttered, taking the keys. They found Rath's office in a strip mall between a Pilates studio and a vape shop, modern America's temple and incense. Inside, a receptionist with austere cheekbones informed them that Dr. Rath was busy. Tell him an old lie has come to see how tall it's gotten, Ben said pleasantly. A door opened. A man with careful gray hair and the self-containment of money smiled without smiling. Mr. Anderson, he said. I wondered when you would grow sentimental. Is that what you call regret? Michael asked. I call it expensive. Rath gestured them inside. The office smelled like citrus and distance. On the walls, degrees. On the bookshelf, the biographies of men who had never apologized in time to matter. Rath listened to Michael's request for a statement with amusement bordering on sympathy. You misunderstand, he said finally. I believed my opinions then. I believe them now. Your bank account believed something, too, Ben said mildly. Rath's eyes iced. And who are you? The janitor, Ben said. The one who knows what sticks to floors and what doesn't. You can't prove I was paid for opinions, Rath said, turning back to Michael. This is America. We pay for time. Opinion is merely what leaks. We have emails, Michael said. Payments to your foundation. A schedule that rhymes too neatly with your conclusions. Rhymes aren't crimes, Rath said, and the jury that matters is the public. It has the attention span of a sparrow. Michael stepped forward. Elias Crow is dead. Wrath's face did not quite move. And thousands more would have died if the company had fallen. That drug keeps people's lives ordered. Do you think disorder is cheap? The moral math on these things isn't elementary. You poisoned the scales, Michael said, then called the result justice. Wrath smiled at last, small and pitying. Young man! I'm 48, Michael cut in. Ah, Wrath said, then you know. The world does not run on truth. It runs on the minimum lie required to keep men civil. He spread his hands. I provide that minimum. Or I did, until the market priced me out. The conversation ended where such conversations always end, on the cliff between confession and rationalization. They left with nothing but a new understanding of how clean corruption can smell. In the parking lot, Ben sat on the hood, staring at a pinking sky. Some men, he said, will defend their first sin for so long they forget where it happened. Michael called Whitaker. He won't crack, he said. Then we'll break him at the seam of his dignity, she answered. Flight records, invoices, a junior accountant with a stomachache. The truth always leaks where pride is sown. On the flight home, Ben closed his eyes and prayed without words. Michael watched the clouds and thought, strangely, of Karen in the kitchen, cracking eggs, humming out of tune. He thought of Emily's boots-wearing boyfriend, and how sincere irritations can be tipping points for better versions of us. He thought of Abel's signs, of Ruth's tired kindness, of Whitaker's hands steady on a pen. Alone we will drown, he thought. Together we might at least teach the sea our names. When they landed, his phone vibrated. A message with a photo. Dana Cho's face, pale in bad light. The caption read, "Sins need witnesses. Keep yours busy." He stopped walking. The world narrowed to a cup's size. Ben touched his elbow. This is the part, he said, where we decide not to be afraid and then discover that doesn't work. So we'll be afraid together. Part 5. The Shadow Beneath the Neon. The city gathered itself into storm posture. Hunched shoulders, quick glances, doors that locked a second faster. Whitaker moved like a woman conducting an orchestra of knives. She had a warrant for records at the nonprofit. She had a subpoena for Wrath. She had a quiet, burning prayer that the grand jury would be human on the right day. Dana was found 3 days later at a motel off I-55, alive, drugged, bruised in the ways that leave no photographs interesting. She looked at Michael with a shame that made him want to apologize for the entire species. "I'm sorry," he said, and knew how insufficient it was. "They told me to say I never saw the emails," she whispered, throat raw. "They said no one would believe me if I said I did." "Do you still have them?" Whitaker asked, voice gentle as cotton over wire. "I forwarded them to myself a long time ago." Dana tried to smile. "I wanted to remember who I was working for." In the hospital hallway, Ruth appeared, surprising him so completely he forgot to be surprised. "I volunteer here sometimes," she said, defensive. "Some people fold laundry. I bring coffee." She looked at him, something fierce in her eyes. "Don't let them make her feel like a noun. She's a person. Keep saying her name." He did. In the press, in statements, at night to himself like a rosary. Dana Cho, Elias Crow, Adam Novak. Let the city say Pierce the way it said weather. Let the rest be names with hands and breath. The grand jury convened. Pierce arrived dressed like a verdict, Wrath like a smirk. Novak testified first, steady, unsentimental, like a man building a bridge while admitting he had also built the river. Dana went next, voice small but accurate. Then Michael. He spoke not as a man defending himself, but as a man describing a landscape he had helped to draw. He talked about incentives, about the seduction of plausible deniability, about dinners where men toasted to virtue and paid the bill with someone else's illness. He did not preach. He reported. That was the only ethic he had left that people might believe. Pierce's attorney cross-examined with the polished contempt of a profession that prides itself on never sounding surprised. "Mr. Anderson," he said, "isn't it true that you only came forward to save yourself?" "It might be true," Michael said, and felt the room tilt. He looked at the jurors, faces stunned to hear a man not argue himself perfect. "It might also be true that in saving myself, I had to ruin the version of me that cared more for comfort than for what happened to Elias Crow. Both can be true." When it was over, the city exhaled again. Outside, cameras swarmed like weather. Karen texted, "Proud is a complicated word. I'm using it anyway." Emily texted, "I don't know how to feel, but I'm listening." Anna sent a heart she'd never have sent last year. That night in the AA hall, the chairs were full of people who did not know how to clap for moral events. Ben set out cookies like sacraments you could eat. Abel leaned his sign against the coffee maker. Grace is not a business model. They laughed, and the laughter hurt and healed in equal parts. Michael spoke last. "When I was young," he said, "I thought the world divided people into good and bad, the kind you avoided and the kind you introduced to your mother. Then I learned the world divides people into tempted and honest about being tempted. I chose temptation long enough to get excellent at it. I'm here because excellence in the wrong thing will ruin you more gracefully than failure ever could." He looked at faces. 45-year-old faces, 60-year-old faces. People who had mortgaged their attention to children and aging parents, who had held dying hands and balanced checkbooks like scriptural exegesis, who had buried pets and fathers and the idea of what this country would do for them. People whose bodies carried weather reports of old injuries. His people. "I don't have a sermon," he said. "I have a request. If there is a person you owe, alive, dead, or the version of yourself that never got born, write their name down. Put it in your shoe. Walk on it until the debt feels like part of the road instead of a rope around your throat." Abel clapped, a single soft sound. "And when the name wears out," he said, "write it again." The verdict came in Winter's last week. Indictments for Pierce and Rath on conspiracy and obstruction, fines that would impress the papers but not the poor. Novak took a plea that tasted like ash but resembled justice enough to be called it. The company issued a statement about commitment to patient safety and corporate integrity, which is to say it said nothing with conviction. Michael returned to the diner where Ruth poured coffee like a priest distributes mystery. "You look like a man who brought flowers to his own grave and found someone already there," she said. "Who was there?" he asked. "You," she said simply. "The part that outlived the rest." He smiled, and it did not feel like stealing. Do you want to—" He stopped, 16 again. "I'm not a reward for your virtue," she said, not unkindly. "But I'll sit with you while you learn how to eat eggs without punishing yourself." They sat. Outside the window, the neon hummed, a parable in pink and green. The city says open and means we are not done with you yet. Michael thought of Karen's kitchen, of Emily's boots, of Anna's new house, of Whitaker's steady pen, of Ben's vacuum, of Abel's signs. The world was awful and it was beautiful and it was waiting, like a jury that hadn't fully made up its mind. He walked home past the old post office and paused on the bridge. The river moved with its stubborn, brown patience. He leaned on the rail and spoke aloud. Not a prayer, not exactly. More like a weather report sent into a sky that might, on some quiet frequency, answer. "I will try to be better," he said. "Not more innocent, just less useful to harm." A voice from the shadow made him start. Abel again, of course, appearing as if summoned by the syllable better. "You'll fail some days," Abel observed. "I know." "Good." Abel adjusted his sign. The night caught in its cardboard grain. "God sees you." He looked at Michael with a mildness that felt like home. "He does," Abel said softly. "And if that scares you, consider the alternative." They stood together, watching the river. Above them, the freeway whispered its perpetual, unrepentant psalm. Neon buzzed. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang and had the grace to be slightly out of tune. The city did not forgive, not exactly, but it made room. Sometimes that's the larger mercy. Michael went home alone and slept well enough to dream again. This time there was no chess. Just a table with chairs, a circle, and a cup of coffee cooling very slowly while people spoke, one by one, about the small and necessary ways they had decided to be human. He woke with daylight on his face and the certain knowledge that while the debt remained, he was at last paying it in the only currency accepted: days honestly lived. If this story moved you, even a little, please tap that like button, leave a comment with your favorite moment or line, and subscribe for more long-form narratives that go deep into conscience, hope, and second chances. Share this with someone who's been carrying a quiet debt. Your engagement helps this channel keep telling stories that matter.